Okay.
So nervous.
All right. Hi.
Hi.
My name is James Happany. I'm here. I'm interviewing first-time author Nayza Martinez. Nayza's book is The Hate, The Hurt, and the Holy. Just to let people know, so your life, you grew up in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
We're in Florida now,
Mm-hmm.
but you grew up in New Jersey, in a part of New Jersey, Union City, New Jersey,
Yeah.
which is a very
Urban.
very crowded community. So tell us a little bit, without going too much detail in the book, but a little bit about your life as a child, what your upbringing sort of was like.
I was born and raised in the projects. That was my identity, was the project girl. I saw more than I should have. I saw like people doped up on the staircase, and you saw people dealing drugs. But there was also that sense of family, because everyone in the building knew each other, but everybody in the building knew each other. So if a family was participating in things that weren't godly, it was easy and you had access to those things. So my mom was always working. My father was the stay-at-home dad, kind of. My dad was abusive, so there was a lot of fear in the house. Aside from the abuse, there was also that verbal kind of abuse going on as well. The way my dad spoke to me was one of those things that was normal. It wasn't a building up, more of a tearing down. And carrying that throughout my life, I felt like that leaked into my choices. I didn't feel like I had a loving environment where, I felt safe. I could express myself. And, living in fear, you internalize. And that set a foundation of, fear, insecurity, lack of self-worth, all these things kind of nobody built me in. Even though I had both parents present, I felt like an orphan growing up. They weren't loving, parents that I felt. I have good parents. I love them. Yeah. But it wasn't this nurturing environment where it was my safe place. I was my own safe place. And that's not always a good place. I think that despite the soil that I was in, I was able to grow regardless. And, being an adult, you don't have those qualities. And when I finally surrendered to Jesus, I had a father who could provide, the confidence and the things that I didn't get at home.
The Bible states in Romans about how, that we go through trials and tribulations. They build perseverance within us. That perseverance then builds other qualities within us that are fruits that we want God to place in us. So for you, was that something that, going through those things? Now, obviously, at the time, it's tough to see that, the further picture. But looking back on that, do you feel that some of those events in your life shaped sort of who you are now?
For sure. And that was why I felt like I needed to write the book, was because seeing all that I went through, and it didn't conquer me, it didn't defeat me. I want that for other people, and I want other people to have an opportunity to get to know who their God is and be changed and transformed in the same way that I was.
So I've read your book, and one of the things that struck me in reading it was that when I look at you right now, and know a little bit about your life as it is right now, it is such a polar opposite of where you were and the things that you share in the book where you were in your life at that time. Were you at a point in your life where you were beginning to look at some things in your life, like sort of looking back, trying to sort of uncover or dig up some things that maybe brought you to where you were?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I was at a point where I was all like healed from everything. And it's kind of like that wisdom starts to kick in, where it's like, okay, I've been through these things, but why? What's the purpose? And then you start seeking God about certain things. And 1 Peter 5:9, resist the devil, knowing that your family of believers are also enduring the same kind of sufferings. That was my heart posture behind it. Like, my suffering has a purpose, and if the body of Christ is going through certain things that I've gone through, I felt like my story had an impact.
Good. I see that. So, just we spoke a little bit. We're getting to know you a little bit here for the audience. Let me give a little bit of a background on what the book itself is sort of about. So the book is sort of an autobiography. This is sort of the your history of the things that you went through in your life from an early age. Some of them, and I say horrific things that you had to endure and went through. Obviously, people that see this look at you and say, well, you don't see that, which is, I think, is to the glory of God, is that's the change that can happen. Why write this book? What inspired you to write the book? What's the reason writing it? People have gone through things, right? Other people have gone through things,
worse.
Some horrific things, some worse, true. Yeah. Yours are pretty bad. I have to say, I'm not sorry to laugh. I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? I read it and there are some horrific things in there.
I wrote the book for other me's. I wrote the book for the people who feel like orphans, who feel rejected, the people who feel like there's no tangible love in their life. Like we mentioned earlier, people see me and they see the joy. They don't know the stuff behind that. And people are shocked when I tell them some of these things. When I step into a room, they don't see that girl with the baggage. You can tell when some people are carrying heavy loads, and our testimony has the ability to change their perspective and to encourage their hearts. And that was why I wrote the book, because I want my story to be able to matter and my life to be able to make a difference for people who have felt like myself. And that even though you see me here and I'm confident and I'm bold and I love the Lord, it doesn't mean I never went through the fire.
And I know from your book and reading it, most of the trauma in your life occurred as a young person, as a young adult, when you were out on your own. Some of the things that you went through and experienced were really traumatizing events for anyone. And I think that people who read this will be able to see that in the pages and reading what you were going through and feeling. What do you have to say sort of for this book, speaking to young people that right now maybe going through things like that? Maybe they're a little different. The circumstances may not be the same, but there are tons of single parent homes. There are tons of families that are just, maybe the parents are not engaged for whatever reason. The children are left to do whatever. What sort of thing do you think your book speaks to in that space?
We're all hungry for something. We're all designed to worship something. And I feel like especially the youth, that they're just being influenced by everything and anything. It's to numb out the pain. And not everyone, and that's why I named the book The Hurt, the Hate, and the Holy, because the minute that you're hurt, if you don't address it and you don't heal from it, it'll manifest into hate. And there's enough hate out there. We don't need to operate in those things. Darkness is so influential right now. I think that my book kind of just speaks to those people to hold on to hope. Hold on to hope. It may seem bad. My story, I didn't think I was going to get out of some of the things. And I honestly didn't want to get out of some of the things that I was in. And I put myself in some of the things. And I know that as a youth, sometimes we kind of feel like we just kind of want everything to stop. And the biggest lie is that there's no purpose on our lives. And had I gone through some of the things and followed through with some of the things that I tried to do, I wouldn't be here. And there's purpose on my life, and there's purpose on the lives of those who feel like there is no purpose, especially those.
Without giving away too much of the book, what was there a point in your life? Did you come to sort of a low point where you then turned and said, I can't, because many people, that's what happens. I know they talk about things with like with alcoholism or any kind of addiction. It comes to when you've just hit your low point, your bottom, so to speak. Was that sort of something that happened for you?
Absolutely. I always like to say that God brings us to our knees so that we can cry out to Him, and
so we can go to our knees.
Yeah, exactly. and I think that I was at a point in my life where I was tired of trying everything on my own. I did it all, you know, and nothing was this lasting joy, you know. And my aunt was an example, your wife.
Yes.
She was always an example of that for me, how you can go through things and still have joy and still have peace. And you know, it's that thing where you look at someone's light and you're like, I want that. Where can I get that from? And I didn't have any light. You know, I guess people saw it, you know, it existed, but it wasn't this thing that I allowed to radiate. And it's not my own light. And me trying to operate in my own light only caused more darkness.
Yeah. I see something you mentioned, and now she pulled back the curtain. Yes, I am her uncle, so it wasn't that I don't know her. But I will admit honestly that having read the book, obviously I was not around Nayza when she was very young, and some of the things that I read in your book shocked me and affected me, and in a way that you know, my feelings toward you and loving you, to learn these things almost brought me some pain and brought me some you know. I felt bad for you. Empathy, maybe that's the word for you. But I want to speak a little bit about who you are now. Because having known you, obviously, before, the change that has occurred has been profound. I think that it's important to know that the change that happened, many people come to Christ. They will accept the Lord, and they will now be a Christian and sort of go about their life. I'm now a Christian, and we know that God makes the change inside. But what I see for you was a change of more of a desire to work for the Lord, to do things that change lives, that influence lives through Christ. What speak a little bit about that, like how that came about, not just the acceptance of Christ, but what then happened for you, the longing to have a deeper, more profound relationship with Christ.
You know, we talk about the water that never runs dry. I was thirsty, and I was satisfying my thirst with things that made me even more thirstier. And when I finally, nothing special happened when I surrendered to Jesus. It wasn't like, you know, a dove descended on me and the heavens opened up. No, it didn't happen. I waited, but it didn't happen. But my heart was open. And I knocked, and God opened the door. And the encounter that I had was just an embrace of love that I've never felt in my life before, not even with my son, and that's a pure love, you know. But it was this love that it healed, and I had access to it, and it then became a desire for everyone needs to taste and see what I found. And it was this thing as I began to know more, you know, and that was reading my word. It brings you back to being a child again. And I finally got to be the little girl that I've always wanted to be. And when I allowed the Lord to bring me to a place of Him fathering me, that was when it was like, you know, I want everyone to get this. Like, I got the good stuff. And that was it. After that, it was like, because of me serving the world and doing things to please myself, I now had a passion to please the God that I love and the God that loves me. And you know, a lot of people want to say that, you know, Christianity is about rules and being boring and all these things, but God aside, when you genuinely love someone, it pours out of you to do right by them. It's not this thing that you change out of obligation. You change out of love to want to be better for that person. And that was my desire. It's about relationship for me with the Lord.
Good. And I see that. I see that in your walk, and I'm so proud of you and what has become. I want to give a little bit of maybe peripheral kind of view. The book is really a written testimony. But I think about the idea that how the change has happened with you, and what God has done is that you now have a son. You now are giving a life to mold, to define in the way that you want him to be raised. And I can testify that this little boy is so full of the Spirit of God, and that is such a blessing, and I'm so grateful to God first, and grateful to you for what you've put into him, that you feed that into him. Keep showing him what that is. And I think
me being able to pour into my son everything that I learned enabled me to give him wisdom so that he doesn't have to go through what I went through. Because I do believe that there are some things that we pass down in our bloodline, and I'm not going to say a generational curse, but it's generational, and if you don't break it, and if you don't allow the Lord to break that off of your family, you will pass it on. And me, like, watching Richie grow has been a blessing, because even though he's only 7, I feel like his faith is way advanced than mine. And
amazing.
It's amazing to see that as a baby Christian, to see my son rooted in these things, pulling out scripture. He points out when the Lord is sending a sign. He has the faith to declare things. And
I see him preaching. I see him praying in front of his classmates and leading his class in prayer.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's
amazing what God can do.
It is. He sees me pray. He sees me be at the feet of Jesus. And when we have these spiritual conversations, I always try to show him that there are other influences opposing the Lord. And I'm all about the next generation. You know, I have a heart for them, because there's so much deception and darkness that I want to see the generation coming up after me to lay hands on the sick and to do the greater works that Jesus said we'd be doing. And I'm grateful that it had a domino effect. And, you know, we've seen it in the Old Testament, how generations, you know, turn to false gods. They come back to their Lord. And for me, I feel like that was what I did for my family. You know, not that I'm anything special, but I was able to endure and then lead my family to the Lord. And for me, that's better than any kind of treasure here.
Yeah. Amen. I encourage everyone to read this book, The Hate, the Hurt, and the Holy. I mean, the hurt, the hate, and the holy. I'm messing it up. The hurt, the hate, and the holy. It is a profound sort of read for me. Even knowing Nayza, being her uncle, but reading this book to me is something that everyone needs to read, because I had a book in my generation, and I didn't read it when I was younger, but it was called Run, Ricky, Run. And it's the story of a young man who was in the streets, lived in the streets, part of a gang, lived that lifestyle. And yet, through famous pastor who came in, they made a movie about this and such, and he came to Jesus and changed his life. He preaches, he pastors, he's just a tremendous individual for Christ and what God has done. I see some of those same things in this story. It is something that will move you to the point where you will wonder, how can something like that happen? But when you see Nayza or hear her speak, you'll know that these things are not just, I don't say these for I wouldn't lie for anyone. But the idea that the change that has happened is so profound that it can only be God. But the hope that comes in that is that it's anyone. She's not special. I know her. Right. She's not that special. No. Believe me. But it's what God can do with a willing heart, with an obedient heart, right? But just a little bit about, how do you see this next season of your life? What do you feel God is moving you toward?
I think about numbers. That's what I can say. I think about numbers. I think that everyone has a certain amount of people that God has prepared for them to reach and touch. I would love for it to touch many people and to hear every story. My hope is, whether you read it and I meet the person and I'm on book tours and I can pray for you and lay hands on you or not, I hope that there's freedom found in the book, and there's love, like love touches, I want people to like kind of maybe have hope again, or tap into, is there a God? Is there someone who really loves me like this? And, I think it's easier for people to read the book and then meet me to see the change than to meet me and then read the book.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you meet me, none of that stuff shows.
Exactly.
You wouldn't know half of the stuff I've been through.
And glory to God, right?
For that.
That's exactly that, and that is sort of the point of this is that what God can do.
Yes.
What God can do in a heart and change a life, because you've changed profoundly from who you were.
Yeah.
And again, you're the same person. You are that person, but what God did was a complete change of your heart. And that change can happen for anyone that wants it to.
Absolutely.
And that's what we have to be encouraged by that, right?
Absolutely. And to see my life, and like I said, sometimes I still identify with the project girl. Some people may identify with I'm just an addict, or I'm just a single mom, or I'm just homeless. No, there's purpose for that. And you may not see it, but there's freedom in the love of God. And we all want love. I think that the love that we have access to on the earth is nothing compared to the love of God. And it's love that doesn't hurt or doesn't hate, right? It's a holy love, and we all need that love to keep us strong. The joy of the Lord is our strength, and God is the source of the healing that we need and the freedom that we need. And some of us walk around heavy because we've been through all these things, and it's just so heavy we don't want to exist anymore. But God stepping into my life, and God stepping into anybody's life, is a guaranteed. You're gonna have trials, but it's that guaranteed of, I know I'm loved and I know I'm cared for, and if God could take care of the birds, he could take care of me. And the Bible is full of imperfect people except for Jesus, and if he chose David and he chose Moses, then I've got access to the inheritance as well.
Yes. And some of the things you went through as a young woman, as a young girl, not legitimized in the sense. I don't mean that in the sense of not being legitimate with your parents. I mean as far as legitimacy of you're just some young nothing from the projects, right? Yeah. What do you have to say? You don't have anything to say. And I think that's something that what happened is, once God takes you and puts you in a place of authority and puts you in a place where his spirit comes over you, there are tremendous things that you can do. And that's anyone. Anyone. And I think that's the story of David in the Bible, is that when God knew the heart that he wanted, all that heart had to be was, David was obedient. David surrendered to the Lord. He looked to God for everything.
Yes.
And that's what you did, what you're doing now. And David danced because of that freedom.
Yeah.
That freedom of knowing I am loved.
Yes.
I am loved and God has me. No matter what happens, God has me.
Yeah. That's right.
Good. So let me ask you something, if because many people don't know watching this, but maybe you can say a word or so to the Spanish community. Say something, speak to some people in Spanish about what you want this book to do.
Okay, so oh boy.
Maybe this one's getting cut.
We're gonna have to clip that part.
That one's clipped. Alright, we're gonna try. Now we're gonna do it in Chinese. We might have just as much luck. To my Haitian friends.
Here we go, we're gonna do it in French now. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm gonna have to skip that one.
Yeah, that one won't go.
Yeah.
Nayza, I guess it was a for me very beneficial. I pray that it was beneficial for others to hear a little bit about you and your story. I think that your book is something, as I mentioned earlier, I think it is a profound statement of what God can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it applies to every life. I don't think it's, you have to have had the same background, same growing up. I think it's just the insecurities, the fear,
Yes.
the self-loathing in some ways that occurs in us when we don't know Jesus, when we're not justified through Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it was a great opportunity right now to get a sort of see the person, the girl, the lady, the woman, the strong woman of God. I can say that now with every bit of sincerity that my niece is a strong, strong woman of God.
Amen.
And I am so grateful for what God is doing. And just in closing, just maybe you want to share a little bit about what you want to speak to some people. Speak a little bit about what you hope your book sort of delivers.
For sure. My main goal is that wherever you are in life, whether you're hopeless, whether you're at the end of your rope, whether you could relate to my story, or whether you felt like there was certain parts that you maybe related to, I hope that in one way or another people are able to see themselves in the book. And I want my story more than anything, the hurt and the hate parts, to really impact you, to say, wow, that was devastating, wow, that, like, I want people to have that sense of, this is not a good story, and see how at the end, whether it's reading the final part of that book, or whether it's seeing me in person and saying, oh my goodness, I read your book and there's no residue, there's no smell of smoke on you, you went through the fire. I want people to be encouraged by that, as we mentioned before, because this world will try to rob you of every bit of joy and peace that you have. And when you have a strong foundation in who loves you, who is fighting for you, who has an eye on the things that have happened in your life, because God sees the good and the bad, and even though there isn't justice right away, we do serve a just God, and there is redemption, and there is an opportunity for everybody to access the love that I hope radiates through me. That is not my own love. I can't love anybody in my own strength. I need God to help me, and I need God to teach me how to, love my enemies and strangers and others as myself. And I pray that this would set people free from their own trials, their own pains, their own hurts. I pray that it softens their heart, because we can forgive people, but it doesn't mean that our hearts aren't hard because of it. And I pray that it softens them, and God takes out the meat tenderizer and starts doing his work on it, because in order for us to truly impact and truly walk in our purpose, we have to be healed by these things. We can't walk around with the damage in our hearts and the hardness in our hearts, because all we're going to do is further damage the world. And we've already got enough darkness. We need the love of Christ now more than ever in the dark world. So that's my hope for the book. You can find it in Amazon and Walmart and Kindle and in the bodega. You can't find it in the bodega. Not in the bodega. No. But you can find it on like almost any platform. And my social media is just.nayza, Nayza, all across.
Great.
All right.
This is wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Done.